In the sports anime Haikyuu, we follow the Karasuno Boys Volleyball Club as they fly their way to the top to compete on the national stage. Of course, their journey isn't without its fair share of difficulties. They meet plenty of opponents along the way, battling stronger and stronger teams each time, and each team is just as determined as Karasuno to get to the top. Among the toughest opponents Karasuno faces is Aoba Johsai High School, one of the top volleyball teams in the prefecture, and its captain and setter Oikawa Tooru. Oikawa makes a dramatic entrance as the first major roadblock Karasuno must get through to get to nationals. Ranked as one of the best setters in the prefecture and coming from a powerhouse school nonetheless, Oikawa is a formidable opponent with not only a ton of experience under his belt but a terrifying killer serve and an outstanding game sense and strategy that rivals and maybe even surpasses the genius setter of Karasuno, Kageyama Tobio. In fact, as we learn when we first meet him, Oikawa was Kageyama's upperclassman and mentor in middle school, which earns him the title of Great King, as dubbed by Hinata. Oikawa and his team are an intimidating and powerful enemy to the fledgling Karasuno, who give Karasuno their first taste of just how challenging the path to nationals is going to be. But if we know anything about Haikyuu, we know that there's more to Oikawa than meets the eye. Just as the series gives every character a chance in the spotlight to show off their hidden depths, there is a deeper story to Oikawa than what his flippant, cheerful personality might suggest. Behind that charming smile, easygoing attitude, and insane volleyball skill lies compelling motivations and human frustrations that make Oikawa more than just a one-dimensional, one-time antagonist. Here for a couple of seasons and then gone for the rest of the series. You may not like him at first, and his arrogant attitude at the start does make it hard, we know. But love him or hate him, Oikawa Tooru remains one of the most popular, thought-compelling, and unforgettable characters in Haikyuu, and for good reason. Today, we dive into what makes the Great King who he is, the darkness behind the bright facade, the shortcomings behind the triumphs, and the pride and struggles behind his talent. This is Oikawa Tooru, the rise and fall of the Great King. Welcome to Cosplay-FTW, your #1 source for the latest lowdown on anime and manga news, updates, and analyses. Sit back, relax, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell. Date wa yo! As with most antagonists, Oikawa Tooru starts out with a pompous, unlikable personality that gets on the nerves of Karasuno's members, especially Kageyama, who seems, for the first time in the series, scared to face off against his former mentor and upperclassman. And he should be. Oikawa is a talented setter with far more experience and skill who helped establish Aoba Johsai as a powerhouse. Indeed, Oikawa deserves his unofficial title of Great King, having not only the expertise and the power but the attitude to boot. Sound familiar? That's right, sounds just like Kageyama's King of the Court title that led to his own demise in middle school. But there's a huge difference between what king means for Oikawa and what it means for Kageyama. Kageyama's title is condescending and mocking, meant to point out his harsh, unreasonable, and solitary leadership, whereas Oikawa's title as the Great King exemplifies what makes him a great captain and setter and acts as a complete foil to Kageyama. As characters like Kageyama, Kochukai, and even Ushijima point out, Oikawa is a setter who is able to bring out the best in whatever team he plays, even if he doesn't get along with any of his teammates or even when he's just met them. Like the conductor of an orchestra, Oikawa is able to bring each individual member of his team together to create a smooth and harmonized playstyle, while still emphasizing the strengths of each member. He relies on a unified and stable strategy that puts trust in his teammates and takes care of any holes in their defense. This greatly contrasts with Kageyama's selfish strategy at the start, wherein he only sets to anyone he thinks is useful, claims that he'd rather do every part alone if he could, and regularly clashes with teammates he doesn't get along with even on the court, such as Tsukushima. This is true in particular to Kageyama's middle school playstyle, which caused a rift between himself and his teammates and gave him a rather nasty reputation. Take for instance Kageyama's former teammates from middle school, Kunimi and Kindaichi, now members of Aoba Johsai. Under Oikawa's leadership and encouragement, both Kunimi and Kindaichi are able to execute moves and plays that Kageyama's never seen them done before. The difference in Oikawa and Kageyama's ability is clear, as Oikawa is able to see what Kunimi and Kindaichi excel at and uses his own strengths and the strengths of the team to fill in the gaps left by their weaknesses. Oikawa trusts and brings out the overall power of his team instead of relying on a single individual's strength. He puts faith in his teammates and adjusts to their needs instead of the other way around. Where Kageyama was a tyrant towards his team, Oikawa is a king that serves his people. Not only does he trust in his team, but his team trusts him as well. They have the utmost faith in Oikawa's skill and strategy, enough even to not get shaken up as long as Oikawa's on the court, and it's this mutual trust that truly makes Aoba Johsai a powerhouse school, like a machine where each moving cog, once set in motion, does its part to keep the mechanism going. Aoba Johsai isn't a strong team only because of Oikawa's talent and serves. Oikawa aside, we see members of Aoba Johsai execute advanced plays, intimidating blocks, and powerful spikes that give their opponents plenty of grief. Rather, Aoba Johsai is strong because Oikawa sees each member's strength, polishes it to its best, and utilizes them all together in order to win. Even when wild card and double-edged sword Kiyotani Kentaro enters the picture and messes up Aoba Johsai's equilibrium in their second match against Karasuno, Oikawa is able to use Kiyotani to mess with Karasuno's own rhythm and score some points. Oikawa recognizes Kiyotani's strengths and the advantages of keeping him on the court, despite clashing with other members, and he's able to draw out that strength and use it in such a short time. Even Sugawara from Karasuno marvels at Oikawa's ability, saying that had Kiyotani been on their team, he wouldn't have known how to deal with him, let alone how to use him effectively in a match. Aoba Johsai's focus on solid teamwork emphasizes Karasuno's own fragmented coordination and yet untapped potential. Oikawa is already scary enough on his own, what with his impressive service aces and all-around excellent athletic ability, but it's the fact that he has his teammates behind him that makes him a truly formidable opponent. As Oikawa was told by his teammate and childhood friend Iwaizume Hajime, the team with the stronger six is the stronger team. It's the belief in this philosophy that allows Oikawa to hone and polish his team into one cohesive whole. And it's the lack of this stable foundation in the still newly hatched Karasuno team that Oikawa exploits in their first official match in order to lead Aoba Johsai to victory. However, even with all his sense and talent, Oikawa Tooru is not a genius. While it's definitely easier to just write him off as one, Oikawa isn't as flawless as he makes himself out to be. In various glimpses to Oikawa's past and even in his scenes where he's alone with his teammates, we start to see the calm and cool facade of the Great King begin to crack. Even with his many strengths and skill, Oikawa Tooru is not invincible, and there are walls that even he cannot scale. Oikawa's biggest challenge and his greatest failure is being unable to beat Ushijima Wakatoshi from Shiratorizawa. His tenacity and strategy are rendered helpless against Ushijima's overwhelming power and height, and Oikawa attempts to make up for his own shortcomings through hard work. As Iwaizumi points out numerous times, Oikawa tends to overwork himself in his race to the top. We see him staying up late to review footage of his opponents' matches to study how they play. We see him staying behind long after team practice in order to practice by himself, and we constantly see Iwaizumi reminding him not to overwork himself or push himself too hard. It is implied that this was all a habit of his even before he entered high school. Through these short but meaningful scenes, we get the impression that Oikawa's talent isn't the result of a natural-born aptitude, but is instead something that he has honed ever since he was young, a result of his own diligence and desire to be the best. Oikawa's perceived genius isn't something that he was naturally gifted with, but is rather something that he had to work for and polish on his own for many years. Oikawa himself admits that he's not a genius and that Kageyama has more talent and precision as a setter, enough even to surpass him. And speaking of Kageyama, why exactly does Oikawa hate him so much? It's clear from the onset that there's more than just a simple rivalry between the two setters. Oikawa isn't afraid to show his petty contempt for Kageyama, though the feeling may not be mutual. Oikawa first meets Kageyama in middle school when Kageyama joins the Kitagawa Daiichi volleyball club as a freshman. Kageyama immediately showcases his talents as a setter and endears himself to the team as a genius who threatens to topple Oikawa's established status as the team's setter and eclipse him in terms of ability, something that only makes Oikawa's disdain of him grow, though Kageyama is blissfully and comically unaware of it all. Oikawa trains harder and overworks himself trying to overcome his own feelings of inferiority, and it eventually results in him being subbed out in favor of Kageyama during a match. Frustrated at himself and at all his hard work seemingly gone to waste, Oikawa takes his anger out on the source of all his angst, Kageyama. Well, almost. Iwaizumi stops him and brings him back to his senses just in time by reminding him that their team isn't composed of just Oikawa alone. Oikawa had been shouldering the blame of their defeat, believing that it was his own flaws as a setter that made them lose against Shiratorizawa. And it takes a headbutt and some wise words from Iwaizumi to remind him that he isn't alone on the court and that the rest of his team is there to make up for his flaws. But why does Oikawa take it out on Kageyama? Why antagonize his own underclassman, a member of his own team? We know by now that Oikawa isn't a genius. He didn't come by his skills naturally and had to train hard all throughout his middle school and high school years to get to where he is. So when someone whom he sees as just naturally better at volleyball than he is appears, someone whom he thinks didn't have to train as hard as he did in order to get where they are, someone younger than him who's already reached extraordinary heights at their age and who can only continue to grow rapidly from there, someone who makes everything look all too easy, Oikawa is forced to face his own failings in comparison. Not to say, of course, that players like Kageyama and Ushijima didn't work hard for their skills, but it's clear that Oikawa sees himself as inferior to people like Kageyama and Ushijima, whom he sees as just naturally gifted at what they do. What, after all, is hard work when compared to pure genius? This frustration at not being on the level of a genius and dissatisfaction with himself and his faults is ultimately Oikawa's greatest strength and his greatest flaw. On one hand, it's made him ambitious. He constantly works and improves on himself till he is able to stand on the same level and compete with the best of the best. On the other hand, it's this same never-ending drive that proves to be Oikawa's demise, often burning him out and even leading him to injury enough times that Iwaizumi has to be there to remind him. But as Iwaizumi himself reminds Oikawa, a team isn't made of just one person. And just as Oikawa brings out the best in his team, so do his own teammates bring out the best in Oikawa and fill in the gaps his lack of genius creates. Talent is something you make bloom. Instinct is something you polish. These two powerful lines said by the man himself exemplify Oikawa's philosophy when he plays volleyball. In a scene where Oikawa talks with a mysterious mentor, he is told that he may never reach the same level as those who are more naturally gifted than he is. However, instead of lamenting the fact that he wasn't born a genius, he can instead choose to trust in his own innate ability and do everything that he possibly can to make the most of his potential. In the penultimate match against Karasuno, Oikawa tells his teammates that no matter if it's now, next year, or even when they're 30, the chance to make your talent bloom will always be there. But if you think that it'll never come, it probably never will. With this line alone, we now see why Oikawa pushes himself so hard, why he puts so much at stake for just a single game. Oikawa is constantly taking whatever opportunity he can in order to grow and reach his maximum potential, because he sees every match, every practice, every moment that he's playing volleyball as a chance to make his talent bloom. And any time that he spends doubting himself and his abilities is a chance at growth that will never come again. It's this drive and this ambition that makes up the core of Oikawa's character. It's this effort and determination to be the best that he can be, despite his drawbacks, that endears him as a character and makes him so much more than just your regular one-note antagonist. We see where he comes from, what motivates him to do what he does, and we see where he succumbs to his own faults and limitations. It's what makes him more human, what makes him dimensional, and what makes him such a relatable and well-thought-out character whose own flaws and struggles reflect so much of our own. But ultimately, Aoba Johsai loses to Karasuno, not because of a lack of talent from Oikawa and his team, but because Karasuno and most especially Kageyama have learned and grown and have taken the chance to make their own talent bloom. Kageyama is no longer the lonely king of the court, and in an ironic twist has learned a thing or two from Oikawa about being a benevolent ruler who trusts in his teammates rather than a selfish tyrant. After Aoba Johsai loses the match, Oikawa confronts Ushijima, who berates him once again for not joining Shiratorizawa and making the wrong choices, all because of his worthless pride. Oikawa, in one of the rawest lines ever delivered in the series, tells Ushijima that he best never forget this worthless pride. Yes, Oikawa is proud. He's haughty, arrogant, and petty enough to hold on to pointless grudges. But he's also proud of his teammates and proud of the work that allowed their talent to bloom. It is Oikawa's pride as a setter that kept him working hard despite his inferiority to more talented players like Ushijima and Kageyama. It's his pride that has allowed him to become the player that he is and has allowed him to bring out the best in his team. It is his pride in the philosophy that the stronger six make the stronger team, clashing ever so poetically with Shira Torizawa's own philosophy of only bringing out the most powerful players' strengths. For someone like Ushijima to claim that Oikawa made the wrong choice by choosing Aoba Johsai over Shira Torizawa is to insult everything that Oikawa dedicated to his team, and insults his pride not only as a setter, but as a member of Aoba Johsai. Oikawa Tooru, the Great King, closes his chapter of the story with just as much pride as he started it with. While his team lost the match and his own underclassman has claimed his throne, Oikawa remains the same proud, intimidating, and hard-working ruler who trusts in his own skills and in the skills of his teammates to make his own path and grab every opportunity to grow and improve. He's proven that you don't need to be a genius to be an amazing player, and will no doubt continue to prove his naysayers wrong. Even if this is the last we'll see of Oikawa for now, he said himself that this isn't the end of his volleyball career, and we know that his pride will be more than enough to take him farther than anyone's ever seen. We've seen how it carried him and Aoba Johsai to become one of the strongest teams in Haikyuu, and we have no doubt that this is only the beginning of Oikawa Tooru. And when he makes it to the top, he'll make sure that we never forget that it was his worthless pride that brought him there. As we anxiously await for the next episode of Haikyuu, you can get your fix of Haikyuu content by checking out our latest Top 5 video. Top 5 Team Captains in Haikyuu, where we rank your favorite Haikyuu captains in Haikyuu. Check out the link at the end of the video to see if our choices matches your top pick. Thanks for watching. This is Cosplay-FTW. Fly!